The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're calling around the globe today. Welcome to today's webinar on Business Process Reengineering, a key component of ERP ROI. My name is January Polk, and I am the Director of Organizational Change and Business Process Management Services here at Panorama, and I will be conducting the webinar today. Before we get started, just wanted to go through a couple of housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded, so we will share that recording with attendees via our website after the webinar. We also encourage you to ask questions during today's presentation using your GoToWebinar control panel. There is a place where you can type in your question and hit submit, and then we will leave 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A at the end of today's presentation. We also invite you to tweet interesting points during today's live event at Panorama ERP and hashtag BPM. A little bit about the agenda today, what we want to cover. I'll start off giving you a quick, brief introduction of Panorama Consulting Solutions, and then I'll talk a little bit about the purpose of today's webinar. We'll walk through an ERP project lifecycle. Then we'll discuss why is business process management so important in an ERP initiative. And then we'll wrap it up with talking about business process management benefit realization and return on investment. So a little bit about Panorama. We are the world's leading independent ERP consulting firm. And what that means is, and we're also our niche as well, and what that means is that we don't provide services other than selection implementation, such as audit services or financial services. We do have a variety of different key service offerings that include enterprise system strategy, the ERP evaluation selection process, where we help companies define requirements and select the right system for their organization. We can also help companies implement those systems in a variety of different ways, be it overall project management for the entire implementation, or looking at it from a quality and assurance perspective and independent verification and validation, making sure that the technical resources that are doing the implementation are following process in delivering quality deliverables. And then we also can look at the organizational change management and business process management pieces of an ERP selection implementation. And we can do that separate as well. So organizations that are just looking to improve their business processes without looking at an ERP, as well as mergers and acquisition companies that are going through mergers and acquisitions, we can help them redefine their organizational structures and help with the change management aspects of those different initiatives. We also can help provide a sales assessment to your companies, and then one of our service offerings that's not widely known but that we are seeing a lot of traction in and have a lot of clients in right now is our expert witness testimony. Because we're agnostic and we're not tied to any particular software, we're often called into high-profile court cases to provide our expert testimony based on the research that we do for that particular court case. And we can represent clients as well as different software vendors. We do have a variety of specialties in different verticals that include manufacturing, distribution, professional services and government, energy, oil and gas, disaster recovery and emergency management, waste management, healthcare, retail, food and beverage, and many more. And our team is globally based around the world. Among our team members, we do have over 20 years of industry consulting and vendor experience. And a lot of our consultants have some type of certification, whether it's a Six Sigma certification, their MBA, project management for the professional certifications, or APIN certifications. And then here at Panorama, we put all of our consultants through a 360-degree ERP certification program. So when they go out and help companies select the right software and implement it, they go in having that certification and the knowledge of knowing what methodologies and tools are to be used when helping companies select and implement a different software package. And then we also have on board consultants who are ProSci certified, which is a newer certification in the industry for change management professionals, so people who can help manage the human aspect of change through any type of initiative, whether it's a business transformation or an ERP project. And like I said, we do have a globally based team, and some of our offices include Boston, Chicago, Denver, of course, is our headquarters, but we also have consultants and teams in Dubai, Lima, San Francisco, New York, and not too long ago opened an office. And then we also have a broad and deep ERP experience. Among our industry relations team, we have experience with over 200 different ERP software packages that we've evaluated and or helped implement for our clients. So whether you're needing something big like an SAP, Oracle, or AX because you're a global company with a lot of complexity, or whether you need something niche or boutique because you're a smaller company and you're in an industry that isn't common for some of those big players. So we do look at all different systems and try to come to the table with a variety of different solutions that will meet your organization's needs. So a little bit about today's webinar. Really the purpose is to provide all of you with an understanding of how business process management fits into ERP implementations. We also want to help provide a learning of how Lean Six Sigma and other business process management best practices can make ERP implementations more successful. And then we'll end it with debunking some of the common myths and misconceptions that organizations and individuals have about business process management. So we'll start off by talking about the ERP project lifecycle. And I know this slide has a lot going on, but really it's to represent all of the different components that happen within an ERP project. So starting with software selection, which in this diagram looks a little smaller than implementation in terms of a timeline perspective, it is the most important piece of your ERP project lifecycle, because if you select the right software and improve all of your business processes and deal with the change management elements during that process, then you're going to set yourself up for success during the actual implementation of the software tool. And you can see that there are a couple of boxes highlighted in orange. Those represent the technical activities that need to happen within your implementation. So those activities that you might leverage technical resources to help build, design, and test a new system. All of the other items highlighted in blue are what we consider business activities that need to happen as well as part of your ERP implementation, but that a lot of companies tend to leave out and don't incorporate into their overall project plans. So it's really important that you don't neglect these blue activities. And a lot of times the technical or software companies will do only the orange activities, and they won't worry about all the blue activities. But those blue activities, again, are what set you up for success for your overall implementation project. One other thing I wanted to mention about this ERP project lifecycle, a question that comes up a lot, and one of the myths that we'll talk about at the end of today's webinar, is when should business process management happen? And you can see that business process management should happen in the software selection phase. In fact, I would even argue that if you can start to do it before your selection phase, you set yourself up for success. Because if you identify those processes that need to be improved, then you can define your business requirements around those improved processes and then evaluate a software based on those improved, optimized process flows, versus selecting the system and then realizing that the system can't support some of those improvements and then having to do a lot of customization so that the software will meet what you need the system to do in terms of business process. So sooner is better. Of course, if you don't get to that, you want to at least do it at the beginning of your implementation process or project. So why is business process management so important? Well, ERP implementations do result in a lot of different changes to a business and the organization, whether it's redefining how the business workflows and processes work, whether it's taking the opportunity at that time to do some organizational changes and move people who may not be a good fit in one role but may be better in another role, and highlighting what those org changes are going to be, or just in general, the way that a system handles a particular process is going to be different. And so the way people do business today is not how they're going to do it in the future. So it helps identify those process and organizational changes, because you do have to document current state to understand what your pain points are, to write your future state requirement document. And by doing that, you'll know which areas, which individuals are going to be impacted by the changes, because you have your current state as your baseline, and then as you improve, or if you don't improve a particular process and you take system functionality, when you get to that point within the implementation where you're blueprinting and designing the system, you can look at how that differs from your current state and identify the impacts that way, and then communicate to the appropriate individuals so that they understand that their role and responsibilities are going to change, but that they also understand that you're going to provide testing and training in conjunction with this process, with this ERP implementation, so that they're going to be set up for success and will know how to use the system and trust the system when you go live. So that's how it highlights a lot of those organizational change management issues, because there are a lot of people who typically can be with a company for a lot of years, 20, 30 years, and they don't want to change. They're used to doing it the way that they have done it in the past, so they're comforted by that, or they have a fear that by the system automating some of what they do, that their value in the company will go down. So by doing the current state versus future state and understanding the impacts and who will be impacted, you can tell whether those people are going to be resistant to the change. And you can put things in place to help manage that resistance before you start your implementation process, versus as a reactive step later on as you're in the middle or toward the end of your implementation project. It also improves the process based on the needs of the company versus the needs of the software package. And this is how it impacts overall cost estimation. So what I mentioned earlier around doing it sooner versus later allows you to then document those requirements, like I said, for your process, and then evaluate how a vendor can meet those specific requirements. Are they going to be able to meet them out of the box? Are they going to be able to meet them with configuration, customization, maybe using a third-party bolt-on, or maybe not at all? So by understanding how they can meet those specific requirements will enable you to select the right software package for your organization. If there's a particular package that you're evaluating and the vendor cannot meet a lot of those key requirements that you need, or key future state requirements that you need, and another software package can, then maybe that might sway you to go with the other software package, because you're going to minimize your costs in terms of what you're going to spend on different types of configurations and customization. So it provides that overall understanding of what the cost is going to look like, and allows you to estimate that cost better than not knowing and having these things come up too late in the process to address. It also helps you identify key performance indicators that help measure performance improvement and project cost savings. A lot of companies, they're just going 100 miles an hour. They haven't had the time to sit down and think about what types of key performance measurements they want to capture and put into a dashboard format. Or maybe a lot of companies just don't have access to that data today because everything's so manual. So by doing this process management up front, looking at your current state processes and understanding where you want to make some tweaks and improve them, at that same time, you can start to define what types of benefits you want to achieve from improving that process and what metrics are you going to use to measure those benefits. So if you don't measure it today, at least you can capture that you want to measure it in the future and make sure that it gets on that on your reporting requirements so that when you're implementing the system, you can set up reports that are going to then gather that data for you. So then you can start to make good business decisions around your data and for the company moving forward. Business process management is also important and mandatory for all ERP implementations because it reduces overall risk to the project, especially when it comes to timeline, scope creep, and cost overruns. Every year we do an ERP benchmark study, and every year we find that a large number of our respondents suggest and indicate that they experience some kind of scope creep and some type of cost overrun. To manage this better, and you can do this business process management and again understand how and realize that you didn't set something up that's mandatory that you absolutely need to keep continuing to run your business. So it helps you manage the phasing of the project and to make sure that you implement the right system requirements initially so that you're set up for success at the end. It also reduces overall risk because by understanding where those impacts are going to be, then you can better train specific individuals or have specific individuals included in testing so that they're bought into the system. What we find is that a lot of companies, if they don't involve the people, then at the end they run the risk of the people not using the system, and then you don't gain the benefit of putting in this new software package. So that's how it increases your return on investment, because these improvements can be translated into cost-saving opportunities. Even labor costs, so people doing a lot of manual work today can be quantified during that selection process and translated into a business case so that you know what your potential labor savings might be, as well as you can quantify some non-labor savings. And all of that, again, by getting people trained and using the system, that automation is going to give you that return on investment, or having access to data that you don't have today and being able to make key decisions on what markets to target, on what customers are your biggest customers that you want to maybe target. All of that goes into increasing your revenue and saving you money and returning on your investment. It also ensures that the key differentiating business processes and logic are not lost during implementation. So it really does protect and maintain your company's competitive advantage. What we mean by that is a lot of companies go into an ERP implementation and they just want to minimize the amount of customizations that they do. So their goal is 0% customization. Well, there's always a risk with not doing any customization. And that's, the risk is that you could potentially lose something that makes you unique and competitive in the marketplace and against your competitors. So what we advise is that you don't want to improve every process within your organization, because there may be things that are not unique, how you pay your bills, or maybe how you order supplies, or how you ship products. Maybe that's all standard, and you can leverage whatever out-of-box functionality is with 0 customizations and just deal with the change impacts of that. But if there's something unique, like the way you go to market, or the way you do your marketing, or maybe the way you handle customer service requests because you're about customer satisfaction, that's unique to your company and you want to maintain, then for those you want to make sure you pull those processes out, take a bigger look at, a deeper look at them, drill down into all the detailed steps within that process, and make sure that they are efficient. Eliminate the waste, eliminate the non-value-add steps where you can, and then look at systems and how they're going to be able to handle that. That way, you're not going to, by implementing a new system and not customizing at all, you're not going to take that risk of losing that competitive advantage. So it's really important to understand what your key differentiators are and what makes you competitive, and to maintain that and not automatically take out-of-box functionality for those particular processes. So when we're looking at customizations, we typically tell companies you don't want to customize more than 10 to 20% of your business, but you need to understand that it's okay to customize a little bit because it might make sense for your company. The other thing that business process management supports is the documentation and standardization of the various business processes. So by understanding current state versus future state and understanding where impacts are going to come up or where change impacts are going to arise, now it allows you to document these processes and standardize them across the organization so that everybody is working off the same manual. A lot of companies will have different locations where they have different groups doing different processes because that's just how they've always done it and they've made it work for their particular location. And maybe the company wants to save some money by having everybody standardized and also to drive consistency so it's easier to look at metrics and pinpoint root cause analysis by having everyone on the same type of process and having that consistency. So if you do that, then business process management allows you to capture those processes in a formal document and to train on those processes so that everybody is up to speed on the new process and way of doing business. It also allows you to maintain traceability of process changes. So going forward, that becomes your Bible, so to speak, and anything that may change related to it has to go through a governance structure and get the appropriate approvals, and then when changes happen, it should be documented in that manual and notated that it's a new version and why there was a change and what the change was for. And then business process management also allows you, now that you have a standard and a current documented state, you can look at areas for continuous process improvement later on after you go live. Because you should always be doing a health check on your various processes to make sure that there isn't anything you can do that can eliminate some additional waste or non-value added steps so that you can continue to reduce costs and achieve a return on investment on your system. So business process management, benefit realization, and the return on investment. Like I mentioned, there are going to be different processes that you want to take a greater look at while you're going through this process. And what this pyramid represents is the 3 levels of different ERP best practices. At the bottom, where you have the basic functionality, this is where we talked about these are the types, so 60 to 75% of your business processes within your organization can probably leverage that basic functionality. They're really non-differentiating in nature. They don't give you a competitive advantage, so you can just take out-of-the-box functionality, 0 customizations, and plug it in, and then realize whatever cost reductions you're going to gain from taking the system best practice. However, there are those, like I mentioned, there's certain differentiators that might make you different from an industry perspective, meaning like maybe you're in the medical device industry and you have to meet FDA requirements, or even in food and beverage you have requirements you have to meet per regulations and compliance. For those particular processes, you want to make sure that you look at those and that there aren't any type of waste, that there isn't any type of waste you can remove or streamline certain processes to make sure that they still meet those compliance and regulatory requirements, and that those requirements are documented and then held against and evaluated against the different software packages. So that might be 50 to 60% of the company. And then there is the top bracket where those are the processes I mentioned, about 10 to 20% of your business processes that might make you competitive in the market that you really want to evaluate, and make sure that they are designed and operating to complete optimization before you select the software package, so that you can then, again, define those requirements based on those competitive advantages, and you eliminate that risk of losing them when you put a software tool in place. One of our best practices that we use to help companies improve their business processes is using the Six Sigma methodology. So we've developed what we call a quick hit approach. So we're able to apply the methodology and the toolkit from Six Sigma to improve those 10 to 20% of your business processes in a short amount of time. So we can do it between 4 to 6 weeks. Because we know a lot of organizations don't have the time to, number one, dedicate a team and staff to do a large Six Sigma process improvement initiative. And also those initiatives tend to take up to anywhere from 6 months to a year to complete. So this quick hit approach allows us to, again, use the concepts of Six Sigma to guide a team through that improvement process so that you can get to that improved state sooner, and then you're able to then document those requirements and move forward with the selection of your new system. So within the quick hit approach, we do a Kaizen event where we get everyone involved who touches that process from upstream and downstream, and we look at all the inputs and outputs. We define the project scope, who is going to be part of that project. We define what key performance metrics we're going to use to measure that process, or are used today to measure that process. We establish the baseline and what we want that process to operate at in the future. And you may ask, how do you know what that process should operate at? There we do a lot of benchmark assessments using companies within your same industry and size to see how they're operating, and where do you measure up against that. So that gives us an idea of what you might want to look at as a potential goal for that particular process. And of course, if you can, estimate some of those costs there by making improvements to this particular process. Then as a team, during that same Kaizen event, we will map out the process, the current state, identify the pain points or failure points within that process, identify the waste steps as well as the non-value add steps, and start to make improvements and streamline that process to eliminate the waste. For those failure points, we also do a quick 5 why root cause analysis. There's a lot of different tools you can use within Six Sigma, but the 5 why allows you to get to it pretty quick, and it's a good brainstorming tool, I find. So once we get to potential root causes, we'll validate that with data if we have data available, and then we'll look at what other companies are doing in the industry, what other best practices are within the industry, and we'll have a second Kaizen event where we bring that same team of people in, and we'll talk about proposed solutions based on industry best practice or based on just ideas from the team on how they might want to improve that particular process. We'll brainstorm solutions, narrow it down, and then vote on the final solution, and then put an implementation plan in place for that process improvement. Oftentimes, companies need a system to be able to help with their process improvement. So companies may wait to implement this process change until the system is implemented. Other companies may not need to wait on particular improvements, and they might implement that process ahead of time to evaluate whether they're seeing the gains sooner versus waiting for the system to do that. If you can do it ahead of time, it's better, because we find that people can only really focus on one thing at a time. So if you're trying to train on process changes and a system, it's going to be hard to know where you're getting the improvement from. Are you getting it from the actual process change itself, or are you getting it from the system? So if you can do them separately, it helps quantify which one gave you the better gain on your improvement. And then, of course, if you do see improvements in your overall process and you like where it's going, Then we encourage companies to put a control plan in place just to identify who is responsible for tracking that process metric moving forward, and what are the control limits, what are you willing to deal with in terms of thresholds and where that metric may fall inside or outside those control limits, and then from there identify what actions need to take place to address those items if those metrics start to creep on either side of the limits that you set up. You could then, of course, standardize and document that process and then capture any cost savings that are the result of that process improvement. And now you're ready then to look at systems, select the right system, put the system in place, and now you have an even more efficient system. If you do not do process improvement ahead of time, you run the risk of just automating an inefficient process, and what gain does that have? So if you can improve some of your processes, if you're not going to use out-of-box functionality, I highly encourage you to do it, so then you know when you put your system in place, it's automating a truly optimized process for you. So these are a couple of steps on business process mapping and how we look at it from a Panorama standpoint. There's different components. So business process mapping is the first piece of our cycle. And that is really just documenting the current state and identifying your pain points and areas of improvement, possibility of improvement. And business process mapping can happen in two different levels. So you can start at a high level and really understand kind of what the main steps are for a process or for your entire organization, and then you can start to drill down into those process steps further to gain clarity and identify some of the root causes and pain points that might be attributed to pain points in your higher level process. So we say start with a very high level process map, and then if there's a lot of pain points around a particular step within that process, take that step out and then break it into the mini steps of that one step and start to identify what the failure points are in that particular detailed breakdown and root cause that. That'll help you, I think, identify some of the true root causes of some of your issues at the higher level. And once you've got all of this mapped out and you have your improved process, then you're going to bring your software in and you're going to blueprint these processes. So you're going to identify system blueprints that are going to identify your workflows, your checklists, your notifications, your triggers, and all of that then can be handed over to your technical resource for implementation. So if you can do a lot of this up front, it helps make those sessions during implementation go a lot smoother. Business process mapping happens in different levels. Again, so you've got just business process improvement, where you're improving a process and removing waste. Very basic. It's dealing with one process or a couple of process areas. When you're looking at business process optimization, you're looking at ultimate efficiency. So you're looking at the entire organization and all of the processes at once to make you completely optimized as a company. It does give you the greater business value, but again, may not be worth it because you may be able to leverage system functionality or system out-of-the-box functionality, best practice, and still gain that result or that return on investment. And then business process reengineering is where you look at a process. Of course, if we can try and keep a process intact and just make a couple of tweaks and streamline it, that's ideal. Business process reengineering comes in when that process is just so broken that you just have to scratch it and start all over again. So it's a radical change. It's not even remotely similar to the way that you do business today. So that'll require a lot of change management activity around it. What we find most companies do is that business process improvement. Again, looking at those key differentiating processes and improving those, and then moving forward with the technical evaluation or software evaluation. Like I mentioned, business process optimization is, again, that process of really optimizing and looking at all of your different processes and removing your different areas of waste. So improving your cost to produce is really important when you're looking at business process optimization. And when you're looking at those areas of waste, you're looking at automation opportunities, material handling, duplication, redundancy, delays, and rework loops. And we have other webinars where we drill down into these in more specifics to provide you an understanding of what those different items represent and how to identify them during your business process improvement workshops. And then, of course, you're always looking at continuous process improvement. So even when you do your optimization or you improve your processes and now you've got a system and you just feel really good about how the company is operating, we always say that there's always an opportunity to improve a process even further. So now that you've got your standard documentation and metrics and you have something to measure, it's good to go back and do those health checks and see, is there any other opportunities for us to eliminate some type of waste or manual activity to increase our return on investment. Plus, another thing to think about is when you're doing your requirements gathering for a new system and you're prioritizing those requirements as a mandatory value add or nice to have, we mentioned that the first phase might be to implement all those mandatory requirements. Well, maybe continuous improvement comes when everybody has had time to adapt to the new system. They all feel really good with the new system. 6 months down the road, everything's working really well. And then now maybe it's time to implement those value add requirements, which a lot of those value add requirements are going to give you this continuous process improvement. And then after you implement the value add requirements, give people time to learn those, and then you might implement those nice to haves. Not only are you continuously improving things and continuously optimizing that process, but you're also utilizing more of the system, because a lot of times what we find is companies will try to do everything at once and people burn out. And you just can't learn all the system functionality. So people will do the bare minimum, so you don't get as much use of the system, versus if you chunk it out into phases, then people get comfortable with one piece, then you open up additional functionality in phase 2, then they learn that, and then now you're starting to use those features within the system that are going to continue to give you this process improvement. It's also important to understand that business process management is an iterative process. So it starts in selection with defining that current state and your business requirements and your pain points. Then it moves into that business process improvement where you're looking for opportunities where you can eliminate waste and non-value add steps, streamline different processes or standardize them across locations. But then once you get into the design phase with your technical resources, this is where you're going to have discussions around how the system can handle it. And the system may be able to handle this particular process a little bit differently while you still maintain that competitive advantage. You're not going to eliminate that. And so then in that particular situation, you might change that future state process a little bit more. And then even when you get into testing, and you start to find bugs and different things are happening, you might make some more tweaks to that future state process. So really, you're making changes along the way, and you finally have that improved process ready to go, that future state at go live. And then again, like I said, you may add additional functionality even after go live as you do that continuous process improvement. So no process is ever done and finalized. You should always be looking at it to be iterative and making tweaks along the way to make it even more efficient for your organization. Another thing to keep in mind is that organizations will typically see a drop in productivity after process implementation. So, and similar with a system as well. You're not going to gain all your improvements once you go live with a software, because it takes time for people to adapt and learn a new process. I always like this anecdote of a warehouse project that I did one time where where the company was missing shipments. That was our metric we were looking at. We wanted to understand why they were missing shipments. when we looked at it, we found that the majority of their shipments that they were sending out, the majority of the product that they were shipping out daily was located on the other end of this large warehouse, probably 10,000, 20,000 square feet warehouse. So they were doing a lot of walking, a lot of waste in walking to go grab product to get it to the shipping area that was located on the other side of the warehouse. And then the product that was located more near the shipping area was stuff that wasn't really shipping that often. So we redesigned the warehouse, moved the product that was shipping out more toward the shipping area, moved the product that wasn't shipping as much toward the back. And then we also put some those driving tools, the different forklifts. We implemented forklifts that could drive across around the warehouse to grab product and bring it over to the shipping area as well. So we implemented those different improvements. Well, you can imagine that people have to now get used to where product has been moved to and where it's now located. So that took some time, as well as learning how to drive this equipment around the warehouse also took some time and training. So we didn't see the shipments get better, the missed shipments get better right away. It took about 3 to 4 months to start to see that really trend in the right direction. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at your process improvements and coming up with your measurement strategy, that you're setting the right timeline to to evaluate whether you think this process improvement made the difference or not. Because you will see performance drop. And too often companies are quick to say, that didn't work, let's scratch it and go to the next improvement. When really it could be, it's just people taking time to learn it. So organizational change management enables your business process initiative. Because, again, you are able to identify those different impacts and assess those impacts and address them with the individuals or different departments. So you can get ahead of it and be proactive versus reactive. It allows you to also customize and process-based training and materials, meaning your software vendors are going to give you canned training material for the system. But if you make process changes along with the system, nobody's going to train on that but your company. So doing this allows you to document what that training is and then to train on those particular process trainings or process changes. And then it also helps with targeted employee communications. So if you know that particular areas within the company are going to be impacted more than other areas, you can target different types of communications to those areas. As well as, because then everybody, if you're not in an area who's not going to be impacted, then you don't want to receive a bunch of emails or information. So it allows you to target those employee communications as part of your communication plan. And it allows you to implement policy and procedure changes prior to the implementation of the new system. Again, I think this goes hand in hand with talking a little bit about not wanting to implement those process changes at the same time that you're implementing those software changes, because people can really only focus on one thing at a time. So if you can, do the process improvement first and train on that first, and then do your software implementation and train on that second. And you'll probably see a better return on investment as a result.